$650 million, 85% of it in one man's name. A studio floor of 40,000 square feet, once occupied by Oprah Winfrey. A compound of 26 acres behind private gates. 3 million bottles of tequila, sold in 3 years. The man who owns it grew up selling sneakers in North Philadelphia. Everyone knows his face. Almost no one has asked the question that actually matters. Did he build something that lasts? Or did he just rent the room where the legends used to sit? This is a channel about ownership. About the wealth, the power, and the legacy that Black families and Black founders have built across America, the Caribbean, Africa, and everywhere the story gets left out of the headline. And this is not the story you have already heard about Kevin Hart. You have heard about the box office. You have heard about the height jokes and the sold-out arenas. You have not heard what he was really trying to build when the cameras were off. And you have not heard what it cost him when the plan hit the wall. The North Philadelphia Blueprint. He was born in Philadelphia at the end of the 1970s, raised mostly by his mother, Nancy, in a neighborhood where the exits were narrow and the money was thin. His father, Henry, moved in and out of the picture, and in and out of addiction. For a long stretch, the most stable thing in his life was a shoe store where he sold sneakers for an hourly wage and worked the crowd between customers. That is where the comedy started. Not on a stage, but on a sales floor, one wisecrack at a time. When he finally got on a real stage, it did not go well. He got booed. Someone once threw a piece of chicken at him. Jay Leno reportedly told him he was not ready. And here is the decision that changed everything, the one almost nobody credits. Instead of waiting for Hollywood to hand him a check, Hart bet on owning his own audience. In 2011, he took a stand-up film called Laugh at My Pain, and he distributed it himself, keeping the upside instead of selling it away. It grossed close to $8 million on a shoestring budget. Fame depreciates. Ownership compounds. He learned that lesson early, and it quietly became the whole strategy. But owning one film is not the same as owning an empire, and the money that came next was bigger than anything a sales floor could have imagined. The foundation years. For most of the next decade, Hart made his fortune the conventional way, one sold-out room at a time. His What Now tour filled a football stadium in his own hometown of Philadelphia and reportedly brought in around $70 million. In his biggest years, he was earning somewhere between $40 and $60 million, which placed him, by more than one industry estimate, among the highest-paid entertainers on the planet. Reports from the middle of the last decade had him pulling close to $1 million for a single live performance. On screen, his films became dependable machines of their own. The Ride Along movies, Central Intelligence, Night School, and his turns in the rebooted Jumanji films, which together grossed well over $1 billion worldwide, made him one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. That is a staggering amount of money. But money earned on a stage is still just income. A paycheck, no matter how enormous, stops the moment you stop working. And Hart seemed to understand something that a lot of famous people never do. The touring money was never the structure. It was the foundation. It was the capital he would use to buy the thing that keeps paying after the lights go down. The only question was what he would buy. And the answer would eventually be valued at more than $500 million, the machine he tried to build. In 2009, long before the headlines, Hart quietly started a production company called HartBeat. The idea was simple and radical at the same time. Stop being the talent that other studios rent. Become the studio. For years, it produced his own specials and films, growing in the background while the world watched the man out front. Then, in 2022, he made the move that finally put a number on the dream. He merged HartBeat Productions with his digital network, Laugh Out Loud, into a single media company. A private equity firm called Abry Partners invested $100 million for a 15% stake. Do the math on that, and the whole company was suddenly valued at $650 million. Hart kept roughly 85%. On paper, his slice alone was worth more than $550 million. He was no longer just a comedian. In his own words, He was now an investment. He was a studio. He wanted to become what Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry had already proven was possible, a black founder who owns the pipeline, not just the performance. And to make it real, he went looking for the perfect room, Oprah's old office. He found it in West Hollywood, a creative headquarters of roughly 40,000 square feet, a space that had once been occupied by Oprah Winfrey herself. He opened satellite offices in New York and in Atlanta. He signed content deals with Netflix, with Peacock, with SiriusXM, with Audible. His investment arm, HartBeat Ventures, took money from JP Morgan and started writing checks into startups, taking positions in companies like the streetwear label Mitchell & Ness, Rihanna's Savage X Fenty, the recovery tech company Therabody, and the longevity startup Tally Health. He also became an equity investor and the on-camera face of Fabletics Men. For a moment, it looked exactly like the blueprint. A comedian from North Philadelphia, sitting where a billionaire once sat, running a company that carried his name across film, television, audio, and brand partnerships. But a building is not a business. And the room where Oprah once sat was about to teach Hart the most expensive lesson of his career, because the empire had one structural flaw hiding in plain sight: the quiet layer. While the media company chased headlines, Hart was building something quieter and far more durable behind private gates in Calabasas. Back in 2015, he bought one of the last open lots in the area for around $1.33 million, purchasing it through a chain of holding companies so the public would not immediately know it was him. He spent a couple of million more building a Spanish-style villa across 26 acres, finished in 2018, complete with an infinity pool, a full tennis court, and a home gym he named Hustle Hart. Then, in 2021, he bought the mansion next door for $7 million in an off-market deal, adding another 16 acres of land. He bought it from Shaquem Compere, a longtime business partner of Queen Latifah. Together, the two estates give him more than 40 acres of hillside behind a single set of gates, most of it land that can never be built on, which turns out to be exactly the point. Notice the pattern. The real estate was bought quietly, held close, and built to last. That is the opposite of how the media empire was built, out loud, with other people's money, and dependent on one man's calendar. And nowhere is that contrast clearer than in the single asset that actually worked, the bottle that stood on its own. In 2022, the same year as the big valuation, Hart co-founded a tequila brand called Gran Coramino. He did not do it alone. He partnered with Juan Domingo Beckman, an 11th-generation heir to the Jose Cuervo dynasty, and with the seasoned brand builder James Morrissey. This was not a celebrity slapping his face on a label. Hart took real equity in a real company, aimed straight at the $15 billion global tequila market, and it worked. Within 3 years, Gran Coramino crossed $200 million in retail sales. It sold more than 3.5 million bottles. It climbed to number 22 in total tequila sales across the entire United States. It signed on as the official tequila of the Philadelphia Eagles, the team from his own hometown. And for every bottle sold, the brand puts $1 toward minority entrepreneurs. But here is the line that matters most of all. Hart's own business partner said the brand now stands on its own 2 feet, that it does not require Kevin every single day. That one sentence is the entire thesis of everything you are watching. If you believe wealth is about ownership and not just income, subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week, this channel tells one more untold story of how black wealth was really built. Now let me show you the part of the empire that could not stand on its own. The businesses built on his name. Not everything Hart touched turned to gold, and the honest version of this story matters far more than the highlight reel. He launched a wellness and supplement line called Vita Hustle, selling hydration and nutrition products built around his fitness brand. He put his name on a premium dog food company. And he swung big on a plant-based fast food chain called Hart House, a real attempt to bring healthy, affordable food into everyday neighborhoods. It was a good idea with a genuine mission. It also closed every one of its locations in the fall of 2024. Some of these worked, some of them did not, But look closely at which ones survived, and a rule starts to emerge. The businesses that lived were the ones that could run without him standing in the room. The ones that died were the ones that needed him to be everywhere at once. Which brings us back to the biggest asset of all, and to the crack that was quietly spreading underneath it, the legacy he was aiming for. Understand what Hart was actually trying to do, because it was bigger than money. He wanted to build an institution. A black-owned media company large enough to hire black writers, fund black creators, and keep the profits inside the community, instead of handing them to a studio that would never share the upside. HartBeat Ventures backed young startups. Gran Coramino funneled dollars to minority founders, one bottle at a time. The vision was a flywheel where a comedian's fame generated capital, and that capital flowed back into black-owned companies that could hire, build, and create wealth of their own. On paper, this was wealth architecture, capital deliberately designed to re-enter the community and multiply. That is the dream. Here is the reality that a Bloomberg investigation laid out in 2026. HartBeat cycled through 3 chief executives in just 2 years. It shelved projects. It laid off close to a quarter of its entire staff. And in January of 2026, Hart signed a deal with Authentic Brands Group that moved his endorsement business out of HartBeat entirely and let him begin buying his own investors back out. The valuation that once read $650 million is now, in the words of the people who covered it, a distant memory. The life now. So where does that leave him? At 47 years old, Hart is still, by almost any measure, extraordinarily wealthy. Most estimates place his personal net worth somewhere between $400 and $450 million, though those are estimates, not audited facts, and different outlets land in different places. He still lives behind the gates in Calabasas. He is still touring, and in the years he tours, he is still one of the best-paid performers alive. In 2024, he received the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, the most serious honor his craft can hand a person. He is restructuring the company, not walking away from it. The empire did not vanish. It shrank, and it changed shape. What he actually owns. So go back to those numbers from the very beginning. $650 million, 85%, 40,000 square feet where Oprah once sat, and ask the question one more time. Did Hart build something that lasts? Here is the answer, and it is not the answer the headline promised. He did not fail, but he learned, in public and at enormous cost, the exact lesson this channel exists to teach. Owning the building is not the same as owning a business. Owning the valuation is not the same as owning something that lasts. An empire that needs you in the room every single day is not really an empire. It is just a very expensive job that happens to have your name on the door. Compare that to another comedy giant of the same generation, Dave Chappelle. Chappelle's fortune, estimated somewhere in the range of $80 to $90 million, was built almost entirely on specials and touring, on being the performer in the room. Hart's, estimated at roughly 4 to 5 times larger, was built on trying to own the businesses around the performance. Same stage, 2 very different bets on what the fame was actually for. The studio needed him, the Tequila did not, and the distance between those 2 things is the whole distance between fame and ownership. He owns the mansions, he owns the equity. But the most valuable thing Hart owns today might be the blueprint itself, the hard-won knowledge of what real ownership actually demands. That is not a knock on him. It is the most useful thing his whole story has to teach anyone chasing the same dream. Fame depreciates, ownership compounds, but only when it can survive you walking out the door. Now I want to hear from you. When you look at everything Hart built, what do you actually see? Option 1. A genius who cashed in at exactly the right moment. Option 2. A cautionary tale about building an empire around a single man. Option 3. A pioneer who opened doors for the next generation of black founders. Option 4. All of the above, because real ownership is always messier than the highlight reel. Tell me in the comments. And if this reframed the way you think about wealth, go watch the story of how Tyler Perry built the exact empire Hart was reaching for and actually kept control of it. That one is on the screen right now. subscribe, turn on your notifications, and I will see you in the next one.